Today, we have Steve Pivnik on the podcast. He's an author of the book Built to Finish, a speaker and advisor to entrepreneurs. We have a lot of fun things we're talking about today. So, Steve, thanks for joining us.
Jen, thank you so much for having me on the show. I'm looking forward to this.
Yeah, definitely. So, I'm going to get right into it. Your book, Built to Finish, emphasizes perseverance and grit. Can you share a story when you almost stopped, but the decision to push through changed everything?
On the business front, as most entrepreneurial journeys are, mine was a roller coaster of ups and downs, near bankruptcy multiple times, a couple of, asset sales and licensing deals, which almost meant the exit of the business. But somehow we managed to keep the business alive and to continue to thrive. So myriad of entrepreneurial stories. And on the endurance front, my God, I've completed 17 full distance Ironman races. I think every single one of those had, one or two moments where I'm like, why am I doing this? But I continued to persevere and got to the finish line. And same with mountains. I've wanted to quit on many times on various mountaineering trips, which I'm sure you're very familiar with, but somehow, some way got to the top in most of them.
Perfect. Can you give me like one specific story that stands out that you can bring us to show this?
Sure. I mean, I think one of the hardest races I've done was Ironman Frankfurt in Germany.
Okay.
And I was a little bit undertrained and I made a ton of rookie mistakes. I've never been to Frankfurt before. So the day before, I went on an excursion out in the sun on a riverboat. And so I was in the sun all day. I wasn't off my feet. I was on my feet. And I had when in Germany, have a couple of German beers.
Yeah.
As a result, the next day was incredibly hard. By the time I got to the marathon, I was spent. I was, running on fumes and I still had about 10 miles left to go. And it was a 3-loop run course at that venue. And you can easily just, hand in your bib and call it a day. So with one more loop to go, I don't have anything left in me. I don't know if I can make the cutoff time, and I'm just going to call it a day. You know how at various racing events, fans write people's names on the sidewalk in chalk?
Yeah.
A month prior to this, my uncle died. His name was Alex. A year prior to that day, my father died. His name was Alex. As if by some sort of divine intervention, I see Alex, Alex, Alex on the sidewalk in front of me. And that just uplifted me so much. I felt that it was like a message from God and from my father and from my uncle saying, Steve, you got this. You've done this before. Just get her done. And I got this third or fifth wind of the day and miraculously made it to the finish line.
Ah, what an amazing story. Isn't that crazy? The universe just gives us little nudges. I did a half Ironman in Santa Cruz, California. And again, I didn't do my research ahead of time. So for me, I'm like, oh, I'm in Santa Cruz, California. It's going to be warm, even though we could wear a wetsuit for the swim. So that should have been a sign that maybe it wasn't warm. And for those of you that are listening, like these races are early in the morning.
Yes.
So I go do this swim. I come out of the swim and I go to the bike and it's freezing, right? Like freezing. So I kept thinking, I'm like, okay, well, I'm going to pedal up this hill and I'm going to get warm. Well, you get warm for like a second and then you'd go down the hill and you'd be freezing again because it was along the coastline.
And it takes a long time to warm up on the bike.
It is a long time. I mean, I'm not kidding you. When it was time to do the run, okay, I could not feel my feet. Like my feet were these like cement frozen blocks. And I'm thinking, I'm wondering if I'm damaging my feet. Like, like all the stories of like, what am I doing wrong? Whatever, blah, 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 blah. And for me too, you have like the numbers on your shirt. I somehow had like someone knew my name and I was like, you know what? This is just ridiculous. This is getting like, my brain was convincing me that I was doing damage to my body that I was not going to be able to recover from. Right. And someone's like, go Jen, go. And I heard that name and I'm like, you person, you, like, how dare you say my name and give me the courage to continue? So
I want to quit, but they gave you the permission to continue.
I know they did. And so I finished. And I just remember standing in the shower of my hotel for like an hour and then the pins and needles happen where the feeling starts coming back to your feet and all those things. I'm like, I am never doing a race in this cold, yucky water again. Like I'm over it. But yeah.
Was this race before or after your K2 experience?
It was before my K2 experience, right? Like all these little experiences.
I assume when on K2 and going through all the adversity that you went through, you drew upon some of these, other events, and you're like, if I completed that race, I can continue going here on K2.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think we keep our stories on speed dial, and you only need one or two. And if you have one, and I have some stories that are so old that I keep on speed dial that keep me in the game.
As long as they work, why not reuse them?
Yeah, exactly. As long as they keep me going, I'm using them. But yeah, so in my climbs, I've learned that preparation and mindset are often what gets you through the hardest moments. How do you help others cultivate the mindset to finish what they start?
Right. So one of my favorite posters that hung. I used to have my home gym was in New Jersey, where I lived prior to Manhattan. It said, "We are judged by what we finished, not by what we start." And I think it's just so important to have goals with the end in mind. Obviously, I preach all the time that it's more about the journey than the destination. And it's really, really important to enjoy every single milestone and the entire path to the end. But you need to have the end in mind at all times and understand why you're trying to accomplish what you're setting out to do. So if you have that as a backdrop, for the initiative that you're undertaking, you just have to learn to continuously remind yourself. And I tell people, like, let's when we're talking about a specific initiative or objective or milestone that we're trying to accomplish, just continuously bring up the why and the end. And it helps get through some of the dark spots and the hard times.
Yeah, no, I think that why is something that I almost have to like tattoo onto myself when I'm doing some of these things, right? It just helps hold you, okay, this is my why, and just give you those little like momentum bumps along the way. So you built a company and led it through challenges, including a global recession that we've all experienced. What strategies did you use to keep yourself and your team resilient during those uncertain times?
We were super fortunate that our expertise was around email and email systems and conversion of email data in the context of mergers, acquisitions, the move to the cloud, competitive wins between the major email players like Google, Microsoft, and IBM. So while there was a global recession going on, and there was a lot of budgets being cut, it's very hard for companies to cut budgets on a mission critical application like email. So while we did see again a lot of pressure from a pricing perspective, we were fortunate that there was still demand for our products and services, and I'm not going to say we thrived, but we kept our head. It was easier for us to keep our head above water more than for others whose solutions weren't, mission critical and were much more of a nice to have versus a need to have. But yeah, there was still a lot of, rah requirements and, motivational speeches and emails saying, what, it's tough out there, but, we're going to get through this. And here's evidence that we're getting through this. And once those messages are consistent, then staff begin to understand that, what, it's not as gloomy here as it is in other places.
I think the tiniest bit of evidence that shows progress, you can breathe a little bit of oxygen into that flame and turn it into a bonfire, right? I mean, it's so critical. I think of every time I've been in a difficult situation where, how do we continue? What's our next move? Is this going to allow us to get back to base camp, metaphorically? And for me, it's getting very granular. Like I remember even being on a mountain, I'm like, well, I can feel my fingers and toes, so we're good. Like that was like that's evidence that we could keep going, guys. I can still feel my fingers and toes. And it's funny how those little things, when you can dial in, get you through those hard times to be able to keep going forward.
I love that. I'm gonna capture that in the memory bank. As long as I can feel my fingers and toes, nothing else matters.
Nothing else matters. Like, team, we got this. And it does help to be mission critical, right? Like to not be an ancillary business or an extra. that just gives you the confidence, like, hey, we're needed. So
Yeah.
we got to do this and show up and be there. Um, you've scaled a company, right? And to do that and to have success requires bold leadership. What's one leadership lesson you've learned the hard way? And how do you teach others to avoid the same mistake?
If I had to pick one, I would say understand that you don't need to have all of the answers. A lot of entrepreneurs, make the mistake of thinking if it's going to be done right, I have to do it. And that could not be further from the truth. No matter how niche your business is, there are people that have been there, done that, and can probably not probably can definitely assist, to get whatever initiative or job done or get to the next milestone. So you don't need to, it's a great sign of leadership where you don't need to rest the entire burden of the company on your own shoulders and to surround yourself with people that are smarter. There's no shame in admitting you don't know something and that you need help. It's actually a sign of power that you're saying this and you're going to progress as a result.
Okay. No, I think that's very true. For me, I can remember starting my business and I had this idea of what it needed to look like. And I was so hung up on what it needed to look like instead of honoring what it currently looked like that I was starting to sink the company trying to get it to where it was.
Right.
And so if I could go back in my own life and be like, you know what? Yes, you need the vision of where you want to go and what you want it to be, but you also need to just celebrate where you are and build from where you are and not get so lost in the minor details that really don't matter and allow that minimum viable product to not be perfect because you're actually going to launch with that and get feedback, and that's going to change your end goal. So how do you help business owners keep the end in mind, but manage the day to day?
Yeah, that's a tough challenge, right? So my specific forte from an advisory perspective is helping founders march towards an exit or the sale of a company.
Right.
Specifically middle market companies and with founders that have been in business for, 10 or more years that really are having a hard time either getting unstuck from a growth perspective or really want to maximize that exit, when it occurs. And there's a myriad of things that need to happen in order for that exit to be as optimal as possible for the founder and all the other stakeholders. And one of the things that we say all the time is even at the very, very, very end of the process, when we're in due diligence and the acquirer is about to write a very, very large check in a couple of days or a couple of weeks, it is imperative that the day-to-day continue to be catered to. Because if anybody takes their eye off of the day-to-day operations of the business, it's going to impact the end result. Because a lot of deals fall apart, a lot of deals get stalled, a lot of deals, get pushed back. And if somebody takes an eye off the ball, there's nothing that'll kill a deal more than a bad quarter or a bad month. So it almost becomes a double full-time job at the tail end of a process to keep the lights on while, marching towards this exit.
Oh, for sure. I mean, my whole vision, right, was like, okay, we're going to have this building downtown with our name on the outside of it. And this is what it's going to be. And I was so focused on that I wasn't paying attention that we were losing revenue by the minute because we weren't focusing on sales. And so it's that whole balance of, yes, that's the direction we want to go, but we get there by managing the day to day. And are we making the dials? Are we booking the meetings? Are we closing things? And just keeping those ratios and numbers in check and managing those allows the end to show up eventually.
100%. Easier said than done, but
it's so much easier said than done. But once it goes wrong once, you're like, okay, never again on my watch. Thank you for the lesson. I got it. We're moving on.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay. In your experience, what separates leaders who start strong from those who are built to finish when it comes to their goals?
Separates leaders that start strong. It's really, really having an endurance mindset and, understanding what it's going to take. In today's day and age, everybody just, wants immediate results and they want almost like, get rich quick schemes. And they need to appreciate the fact that Rome wasn't built in a day and
Right.
which is so incredibly true. And that it's a long haul, right? Unless there's definitely exceptions, right? There's these unicorns that, pop up and are, have billion dollar valuations in a year or two. But
But
that's
let's
why
be
they're,
real. Those are unicorns, and that's why we hear about them, because it's so rare that we're putting it in the news. It's not in the news because it happens every moment. It happens in the news because it's not normal.
yeah, 100%. So we hear about those. We don't hear about the other 70% that never make it past year one, right? So everything in the middle is, where the meat is and where the true value creation is. And again, it's a long drawn out process, and it's going to take, 5 to 10, sometimes more years to really build true enterprise value. So you have to start with that in mind, and understanding that success is not going to happen overnight.
No, I agree. And I think a lot of times we mistake intensity as more important than consistency. And consistency outbeats intensity all the time, because
Well
you just
said.
can't
Well
keep that
said.
intensity going at all times. And for me, I think of it when we climb a mountain, you can see the path, like there's a straight shot to the top, but you don't take that. You
Sure.
take zigzags and switchbacks and all these different ways, because it's an endurance game. It's not a sprint game, for most of us. And so I always keep that metaphor. Am I sprinting to the top, or am I using my switchbacks? Because one gives me more bandwidth to absorb whatever's coming forward, and one is taking everything it is to get to where I am. And I don't know if I have the juice to keep continuing.
Yeah, well said. I mean, I like to say that entrepreneurship is an endurance sport. There's so many similarities between the
Yeah.
planning, preparation, execution, pivot, setback, stamina. The list goes on and on and on. So you need to be, in it for the long haul, and understand that there's no straight line to the top.
No, not at all. Okay. So high performers often have a process for dealing with failure. What does yours look like, and how has it helped you stay the course?
Oh, there's been so much failure. I love to say that you need to look at failure as a data point, right? Don't look at
Yeah.
it as failure. You're just look at it as a data point, and learn as much as you possibly can from it. Again, one of these other things, which is, easier said than done, because sometimes it's really devastating, right? A project can lose, millions of dollars, or you can get injured during an event. But just understand, why it happened, dust yourself off, and don't repeat the same mistake twice. What's the term? The definition of stupidity is doing the same thing twice and expecting different results. So don't do the same thing twice. If it failed the first time, there's probably little chance of it succeeding the second time, unless you really make some significant changes and or pivots to adjust whatever it is that you're trying to achieve.
Failure as a data point is such a powerful, quick, punchy statement that you can keep in mind. Like, I remember climbing, and I brought gloves that I thought were going to be good, but they actually let the wind go through for some reason. Like, they had like leather covers on one part, but they had little spots where there
Like a,
wasn't.
like mesh on the other side.
Yeah, it was just one of those things of like, oh my gosh, these gloves are so expensive, and I can feel like the breeze coming through them. And it was so frustrating, but it was like, okay, this is what I learned. I need to practice with different gloves, because they might look the same on the outside, but they definitely have different features that allow you to like be in different temperatures, because at some times it's nice to have that breathe through, right? Because you don't
Mm-hmm.
want to get too hot that you're wet, because if you're
Sure.
wet, you're in trouble. But at other points, you're like, okay, I have no room for any coldness entering this glove. So what does that glove look like? And I remember climbing in Russia. I tried 19 pairs of gloves to find,
Wow.
and I tried 20 pairs, shipped back 19 to keep one. And I only learned that strategy from failing a time before.
Mm-hmm.
And so for me, it was like, okay, that failure taught me that this next climb, like I need to be dialed to a T, because it is so technical, and so like the weight matters, every little detail mattered. And it was almost, if I didn't have that failure before, I wouldn't have this knowledge to be able to perform how good I am performing in this new environment. And so
Yep.
for me, when you say data point, it is so true, because it just allows us to up level the next time for the next thing.
Yeah, 100%. Like at the time, my last attempt at Denali in Alaska, I failed. I didn't make it to the top. And was I miserable at the time and, disappointed? Absolutely. But right now, I can't tell you how happy I am that I failed on that climb because I learned so much and I'm not going to, repeat those same mistakes on my next one, which is going to be even tougher. So I got so much data from that failure. It was
Yeah,
great.
it's a lot easier to excavate failure than it is success, just because you have that pause built in
Right.
of recalibrating and integrating and continuing on.
Hmm.
So you're an entrepreneur, a father, an author, like all these different roles that you've had to juggle. What's your secret to maintaining focus on what truly matters?
Oh, wow. What truly matters is, I mean, I'm a family first type of guy.
Yeah.
Love my family, my wife, my kids, my mother. They're an incredible, support system for me. And, seeing, having, their love and encouragement and support during all my crazy adventures, really propels me, to keep, going forward. But at the end of the day, it becomes a huge sacrifice, right? Because, business, endurance sports, mountain climbing, those are massive time commitments. So it is a continuous, juggling act to make sure that, you allocate the right time everywhere. But it becomes a lot easier when they're just truly, truly supportive of all of these activities.
Yeah. I'm a family first person too. And for me, I remind myself I have three roles, right? I'm a mom, I'm a business owner, and then I'm an athlete. And so when I review my calendar on a weekly basis, I reflect and say, okay, did it really show that I'm a mom first? And then
Right.
I'm business second, and then I'm athlete third? Or is my calendar skewed a different way? Because I think our calendars are our accountability partners. And if we really take the time to look at them and know, hey, next week I'm going to look at this. And if it's skewed, I can be proactive right now and make sure that it's not skewed. So that's been a huge thing for me is just checking in with that calendar, lining up with mother, business owner, athlete, and making sure that reflects it.
That's great advice. I'm going to start putting family time in a different color so I can see which
Yes.
colors are are more dominant than others on a weekly or monthly basis so that I'm not fooling myself that I'm giving enough time because one of the things I like to say is I hate the term quality time. It's really quantity time with family. And there should be quality time at work and quantity time with family.
Yeah, I get it. We never know when those little magic moments are going to happen. If we can be there for them, they're more likely to show up. So,
Exactly.
so in Build to Finish, you highlight that belief is the foundation to success. How do you help people strengthen their belief when self-doubt creeps in?
Yeah, self-doubt, imposter syndrome, and every other, common phrase you want to use is very prevalent in society. You just have to, I think you have to go back to your why, just like I mentioned earlier. And you have to, everybody needs a little bit of encouragement sometimes and a little bit of motivation. And it goes a long way, which is why people hire accountability coaches or advisors. Part of the package not only includes the subject matter expertise, but also the inspiration and motivational, and sometimes, the psychiatry couch, right? I speak with a lot of my clients and the beginning of the call goes like, we're not going to talk about anything tactical today. I just want to get on your couch today, Steve, and I just want to vent. And I just need you to hear me out. And I just need you to tell me it's okay. And those happen very, very often. And it's incredibly therapeutic for entrepreneurs to vent about things that are going on and to hear from others that have been there and done that to say, that's okay. If this wasn't happening, I'd be surprised. Going back to the exit process, if there aren't, 2 to 3, sometimes more, unfortunately, huge curveballs that are thrown during the process, then something's wrong. I mean, that's an anomaly for huge for huge pivots or setbacks, to occur. So say, calm down. It's okay. This is not, you're not the first one to go through this. We'll get through this as well.
Yeah, I think when we normalize self-doubt and just are like, this is part of the process, expect it to show up. When it shows up, vent it out. Don't hold on to it. Don't create it
Right.
into a bigger story than it needs to be. Share with somebody that allows you to dissipate the energy of it and continue your climb metaphorically. For me, I found when I build avatars for different roles, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I have a speaker avatar, I have a great mom avatar, I have a mountain Jen avatar. And these avatars remind me of what that ideal person looks like. And instead of focusing on what I'm lacking in the moment, I start connecting to that avatar and the energy that that person is, and think of one thing I can do that would allow me to show up as the avatar that I'm not doing right now.
Okay.
And that just gets me out of the current story and helps me progress on what I'm doing.
Excellent.
Yeah.
That's good advice for others.
So I often talk about like one step, one step, one step, just focusing on one move at a time that can get you through basically anything. How do you coach individuals to stay present and avoid overwhelm when finishing big goals?
Yeah, I mean, it's all about measurement, right? You mentioned KPIs earlier. I'm a huge fan of KPIs and measurements across the board,
Yeah.
and you can't manage and you can't improve what you don't measure, and that has proven itself, time after time at the time. So there needs to be an incredible amount of diligence around the KPI program that any company has, so that they at all times understand where they are definitely on a quarterly, so most of the time monthly, down to weekly, and occasionally on a daily basis. So if you can stay present, to those measurements, then you can perform or exceed, performance on whatever goals you've established for yourself, your group, or the organization.
Yeah, I agree. I think if you keep focusing on the input, right? Like what can I control? What are my stats when I do this, right? When I was in cold calling, I knew that if I reached a 100 households, 97 would say no and 3 would say yes. And so I just had to focus on that 100 number, like get in touch with 100 households, and that's going to be what I can control to give me the outcome. And as I got better, it got better, but that was the numbers that I could control to give me the outcomes that I desired.
Yeah, I just heard a really interesting thing yesterday, and I put it on my calendar today. They're like, if you're trying to accomplish something, set out to get 5 no's tomorrow.
Oh,
So go
nice.
look for 5 no's and watch what happens. So basically, reach for the stars. So my example, like if you want to get on a really high rated podcast like this one, go reach out to 5 hosts on super high rated podcasts, expecting to get a no, and give it your all. Reach out to them and watch the magic happen. You'll probably get at least one yes.
Yeah, right? If you just go for it. I love that takeaway. Thank you for sharing that. So you've also talked about the importance of grit over talent. How can someone build grit if they feel like they weren't born with it?
I come from an immigrant family. We came to the United States from the former Soviet Union, and I learned the grit by watching the grit. So if you're not born with it, I think you could definitely learn it. There's a million and one examples out there. Everybody from, Elon Musk is an extreme example of somebody who has an insane amount of grit with the work ethic that he has. But there's plenty of other examples and, leaders, to learn from. And again, it goes back to measurement, right? If you're putting in like 30 hours a week at your startup or this new initiative, and you're not seeing great results, well, guess what? You're not grinding hard enough. You're not where you want to be because you haven't grinded enough. And to get further, you have to continue to grind. So I think it's something that can be learned. And maybe an accountability partner is something that comes to mind here, which would be a way to really keep you honest, for somebody else to say, you know what, that was a great effort, that was a great week, that was a great month, etc. Or, you know what, you played like 4 rounds of golf last week. What did you expect to happen with your business?
Right. I just took my boys to Kilimanjaro to do the climb with me
Oh,
because I
awesome.
wanted them to feel that struggle. And I wanted them to see like, hey, I can overcome this, or this is all temporary
Mm-hmm.
and I'm allowed to feel frustrated or whatever. But the next day I need to get up and keep climbing.
Right.
And so I think when we put ourselves in situations that test our grit, it also allows us to improve our grit. It's kind of like a muscle. The more you use it, the more stronger it becomes, the more you're able to accomplish. Um,
Absolutely.
so my audience loves hearing about real summits in life. So what's a personal or professional summit you're proud of, and what did you learn from that climb, metaphorically?
I guess the most proud summit I've had is the sale of my business, right? Being from an immigrant family, we were entrepreneurial. We were after the American dream, which, my father pursued. He succeeded, then failed. I started, failed, started, failed, started, and then the third time's a charm. And that one really, really went well, not without its ups and downs, not without its roller coaster ride, like I mentioned earlier. But when we finally got to serious scale, and in my case, that was approaching $40 million, 40, in annual revenue, and started becoming an attractive acquisition target, to me, that was like, seeing the tip of Everest, right? I'm like, we're almost there, but there's still so much more to go, right? And I can go into a lot of details about what I actually did, to get to that tippy top. But the biggest accomplishment, this is a really long answer, was the actual, sale of my company and finally realizing all this value that was created over a, 26-year run.
Right. I think a lot of us forget that these overnight successes are decades in the making. And you just have this faith in yourself, like, this is working, this is working, this is going to work out. And then when it finally does, it's almost disbelief at some level. Like, how did we, like, what? Because there's so many years that like transcribe into a signature on a line of a business being sold.
Yeah, exactly. And when you're finally there, it's almost like running a marathon, right? It's 26 miles, and then you're huffing and puffing, and you're giving it your all. You want to quit, but you keep going, and then mile after mile. And when you're finally done, it's like, oh, that wasn't that bad.
Right. Well, it's like having a baby for a female, right? You're like, it's this horrible ending to a beautiful, blissful ending, right? Like, you're just like so much pain, and then you have this little human. And the entire time you're pregnant, you're like, I swear I'm never doing this again. And then you do it again because you forget all the pain.
100%. That's one of the, there's a whole bunch of, parodies out there and memes about like what marathon runners and endurance athletes do, like less than 48 hours after going through this excruciatingly painful event, they just sign up for another one.
Okay. So writing Built to Finish must have been its own journey. What was the most transformative insight you gained from reflecting on your life and career?
I started getting transformed when I started receiving feedback from random folks that just found the book on Amazon and read it because they searched for inspirational story or, motivational book. And they found it because it was advertised on Amazon, and they would reach out and, thanking me for sharing my story, thanking me for inspiring them to set audacious goals. My favorite word, audacious goals. And I would respond to them because when they stated like what their goal was, and then their surprise for getting a response from me. I'm like, because they're like really putting authors up on pedestals saying, hey, it was just a shot in the dark. I felt I needed to reach out and thank you. And I'm just blown away that you actually responded to me. So it was transformative to me in that it like, wow, my work actually made a difference in at least this person's life. So they went from, in this one instance I'm talking about, he went from being a couch potato to taking up triathlon, and he completed his first sprint triathlon as a result of my book, which is a huge accomplishment. And I'm like, wow, I made a difference in one person's life. And then when those emails continue to come in, I'm like, holy cow, this is so rewarding.
Yeah, when I was writing my book, like you go through the experiences and you feel like you integrate them, but when you actually put them onto paper and then you start seeing some of the through threads, and then you can start like just making it into more punchier sound bites, like big mountains take big teams. It was a concept I understood, but once I languaged it, I was like, now I really get this. And so that process just really drove home all the lessons at a more precise level, I'd say.
Yep.
For me. So yeah. Okay. So if you could offer one guiding principle for listeners who feel like they've started but stalled out, what would it be to help them cross the finish line?
Surround yourself with at least one individual, sometimes more, that have already accomplished what you're trying to accomplish. Goals are rarely, brand new and novel, right? Somebody has, finished that race, has climbed that mountain, has sold that business, has a great relationship, has found their perfect soulmate, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Find that individual or individuals, and you would be amazed at how people want to help. People that have accomplished things like yourself. You were super generous with your time when I asked you about your Everest experience, because I'm going to Everest in May of next year. And you gave me an hour of your time with a whole bunch of great advice. And I'd be willing to do the same. If anybody wants advice on triathlons and Ironman and other mountains that I've climbed, I'm happy to get on the phone and share. I think people are hesitant to ask for advice because it's a sign of, they feel it's a sign of weakness, but use it as a sign of strength. Use it as a sign of showing that you really want to get this accomplished so bad that you're willing to get help.
Oh, I like that. The sign of asking for help is showing that that's how bad you want it. Like that's
Exactly.
such a powerful reframe, because I think sometimes people ask for help and they feel weak, but really asking for help is a statement. I want to do this. You've been there. Help me with the shortcuts, or let me know what I should be looking out for that I don't even know to consider because I haven't been on that pursuit. And I agree. Like every person I've reached out to, if I'm serious about what I'm interested in doing, they're ecstatic to help. And I'm the
Sure.
same way with others. So yay. Okay. So how do people find you, reach out to you, connect with you, and get a little more of you in their world?
All of my social handles and my email address is available on my website, stevenpivnik.com. My email address is steven@stevenpivnik.com. So that website will have my Instagram, my LinkedIn, et cetera, et cetera. So that's the best way to contact me.
Great. Thank you, Steven, for your day today. Hope you have a good one.
Jen, thank you for having me on the show. This was fun.